but I'm speaking with Mr. David Buckley about his newest score to the suspense thriller Gone, starring Amanda Seyfried. And David has been the nicest guy to me, because back when I was starting to get the site going with no contacts, had never done an interview before. We did the Facebook chat, and then we also did an email one for the town. But this is our first phone chat, so thanks so much.
Oh no, pleasure to talk man to man at last.
And so I know we talked about this in our past interview, but for people who maybe missed it, and I think you have a great background. So how did you get started in music, and what led you to film composing?
Yeah, I think my first sort of exposure to film music was as a choir boy. I sang on the soundtrack to The Last Temptation of Christ, the Scorsese film, with the Peter Gabriel score. And I think it was a bit of an eye-opener, in as much as, I was putting a very sort of traditional choir boy thing, singing church services every day, and not to say it was boring, far from it, but this was definitely, this was a noticeably different event that happened in the weekly cycle, and all of a sudden here's Peter Gabriel and big images up on the screen that we're singing against, and all this gear, and I think it did. I wouldn't say that at that moment in time I said I wanted to be a film composer, but I do think it planted a seed, and it did suggest to me that there is another way that music can be used besides just being for its own benefit. There is a synthesis it can make with other art forms. Mm-hmm. And then I continued in that choir. We also participated in a piece of music. It's a composer we've spoken about before, a composer called Richard Harvey, an English composer.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
And multi-instrumentalist. I mean, he did a lot of the woodwind solos on The Lion King, and he wrote a huge piece back in the 80s. God, it seems weird to say back in the 80s. Very end of the 80s, called The Plague and Moonflower, which was a big, almost like an oratorio. It had orchestra, choir, electric instruments, ethnic instruments, some narration, big sound and light, spectacular as well. And we were singing. We did various performances of this, and even though it was, ostensibly a classical work,
right.
It also, he had both a classical and a film background, and there was sensibilities in there which immediately appealed to me. In fact, Richard and I have become very good friends now, and actually Richard's been very helpful in my career. So I think those two things, I think the Peter Gabriel and Richard Harvey experience in my, when I was 10, 11, 12, definitely put something in place which I guess years later I decided to pick up on and pursue.
Mm-hmm. And when did you move to Los Angeles?
It only seems like the other day, but I was just thinking about it. I think it's about 5.5 years ago now. It was one of those things which was, come over for a few months.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 months. That's what the initial thing was. And then, 5.5 years later, I'm still here. And in fact, just about to apply for a green card. Actually, as soon as we finished today, I need to rush off to the hospital and check that I haven't got any weird diseases, so I can qualify for a green card. So, crossing my fingers there.
Well, I think I'll be fine, but although in LA you never know, just from breathing the air.
You never know. You never know.
But so you also work with your friend and collaborator Harry Gregson-Williams. How did you two meet?
Well, actually, that brings the Richard thing back into the equation again, because it was actually Harry's father who had commissioned Richard to write The Plague and Moonflower. Mm-hmm. Harry's dad, I think it was Richard Gregson-Williams, he was an arts promoter in England. He was involved in big festivals, one of which was the Exeter Festival. Exeter's a town in England. And he had put this whole idea together, and he had asked Richard to write the music and other people to work on different components of it. And I think that's where I probably met Harry for the first time. In fact, I know it's where I met Harry for the first time. I remember he was actually, I think he was conducting the boys' choir that was singing in that piece. Mm-hmm. And our paths continued to cross in those kind of circles. Richard and Harry were working together. And again, so that was in my sort of earlier life, and years went by without us knowing or even thinking about each other. But then I remember I had just happened to catch the film Miss Smithers Scent of Snow. I'd read the book and I saw it on TV.
Right.
I think it's one of Harry's early credits, and I was watching through to the end, and I suddenly saw the name Harry Gregson-Williams. I thought, blimey, you know, the last time I saw him was in this little English town called Exeter, and now I'm gathering that things that he may have moved on a little bit. And so eventually, with Richard's involvement, we kind of met. I came over here just to see what goes on in LA, and we met up again and got talking, and then the rest, as they say, is history.
And so now you just composed Gone, and you're returning to the suspense thriller genre, which you have experience in. You recently did Joel Schumacher's Trespass with Nicolas Cage and Nicole Kidman. And so do you find it hard to differentiate yourself doing similar genres, kind of very close to one another?
Well, it's interesting, actually. I mean, last year, Gone was a score that I finished last year, and yes, just before that was Schumacher's Trespass, and then at the very beginning of the year was another thriller called ATM, which I believe is going to be released in maybe in a month or so. And they were all dark, noirish kind of subjects. ATM was about 3 people trapped in an ATM machine, and sort of mindlessly, for no apparent reason, victimized. And yeah, it's a pretty, it's a bleak landscape. It's a bleak story. Trespass, different but similar. It's a Nicole Kidman, Nicolas Cage in their beautiful home, and burglars come in and terrorize them. Gone, a different plot, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
It's a girl looking for her sister, and a person who she believes kidnapped her sister, and in fact kidnapped her many years ago. But yeah, I mean, they're all living in a dark place, and dark is somewhere that I have gone to, and people seem to like me going there. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, I think we've spoken before about my ideal, and to a certain extent I've been lucky here, but I'd certainly like to tip the balance a little bit more into finding projects which don't just simply live in a sort of thriller genre. I'm very lucky that while I've been doing these movies, I've maintained my TV show The Good Wife, which is a real life, it's a legal thing, but as much as anything else, it's also about love and normal things. So that musically, even though it's not a huge vehicle for me to express myself musically, it's just not one of those shows. And in fact, I think one of the great things about The Good Wife is that it isn't just consistent music playing all the way through. When cues come in, they tend to have a purpose and not always just exactly what's on the screen. I think the way we spot it is actually quite interesting. But it does give me a little scope beyond the thriller genre. But I think the challenge is, especially having done 3 of these films in a row, that the challenge always for me at the beginning is to think, well, how can I avoid doing exactly what I did last time? And it does require sitting down and thinking, even before one actually commits to here's a cue. It is a case of trying to come up with a concept that just distinguishes it, just so one feels a progression, and that one isn't just living in exactly the same sonic world.
Right.
And obviously it's the job one has to do as well, because the film requires that you set a musical landscape for that particular movie. So, for example, with Gone, quite a lot of the movie is, or at least the topic of the movie is about the forest, which is huge, foreboding forest. In Portland, where Jill, the girl, was kept in captivity, and it's a menacing. There's some amazing scenes of the camera going over these trees, it's seemingly going on forever and ever and ever, and it does give you that sense that one person within this huge landscape is insignificant and could potentially never be found.
Right.
So trying to set up that sort of feeling of desolation and despair was I guess was one of the key first jobs for me to find in Gone.
And which you did very well. When you start off with just the piano, and then I like how you just kind of introduce more layers and layers as the film, I guess, gets deeper and deeper into the belly of the whale, and the way you use electronics too, which we've discussed a little bit, but and a lot of composers use synths and electronics in their music. But for you, what's their function in your music, and what do they add to the score that maybe acoustic instruments don't do?
Well, this score was one where, I mean, I think it's one of my sort of maturer electronic scores.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was quite glad to do on this one, partly there was a little bit more unexpected time on this one. After I had sort of set that initial, well, I should say first of all, actually, the sort of remit, as well as me sort of agonizing how I approach a score, this one that I was also, oh God, I knew this might happen. That's right, I'm just going to not answer it. One of the things that I was told very clearly with this is that they wanted a sort of minimal approach. They didn't ever want it to get too big. Mm-hmm. They didn't want the music to overwhelm. It wasn't to be orchestral, and even though, you know, you will hear strings in there. So there was some clear direction from that, and actually that minimal and not getting big were things that I was constantly reminded about. Obviously, there are a couple of chase action sequences in there where she's, you know, driving around in a car and there's all hell breaks loose, and for that, you know, I'll have to up the BPM and the volume for that. Otherwise, it would sound a little bit odd. But it tends to be quite still. But with regards to sort of sounds and electronics in this, because I had this extra little bit of time, there's a player that I've used, Harry has used him a lot, an electric violinist called Hugh Marsh. And he's Canadian, but he came down to LA to play on the score. And we actually sort of went beyond the initial idea. Initially, I had written some stuff and he was going to play on the electric violin, which we did. But we also did, I know it sounds very pretentious, but we found lots of weird kind of, so, for example, some of the percussion was made by just getting a pencil and tapping a glass, and like weird kind of strummy effects on guitars and blowing cymbals and things like that. I mean, I've got this silly little collection of found instruments and things that we just sort of hit and made rhythmic patterns, and then they went back into the box and started messing around with them. So I think, yeah, I mean, a lot of the sounds in this score, more so than perhaps many of the other electronic scores I've done, the sound sources are largely, I'd say probably 70% largely organic, things that were recorded, and then sort of processed, mangled, distorted, and you know, and some overtly more synthetic sounds added with it. But you know, for example, I mean, the piano theme itself, very simple 5 notes, but that is also often just twisted very slightly, like there might be a weird little delay, or it might be reversed or put into a strange reverb space, so that the seemingly, I mean, it's not, you know, it's not the first time anyone's done this, but it was, you know, part of that tradition of the seemingly ordinary and commonplace, namely a little piano motif, is somehow subverted to sometimes, you know, grotesquely, but often just subtly, and the very small nuances there can help, I think, give you a sense of unease, which is what we were looking for, certainly before we get into the meat of the film, when we're actually just trying to show her sense of anxiety, and the fact that everything and everyone has an element of suspicion. That just little turn of the screw on a sound hopefully gives that unease and unrest that the filmmakers were looking for.
Which you do very well, because what I love about Gone is that you have all these kind of layers and stuff working, but yeah, you're right. It does sound organic. It doesn't sound processed. It doesn't sound kind of jumbled together, and you can like kind of distinctly pick out every little sound, so it feels like it's each their own individual thing. So you never get, I guess, it's not a loud score, but it does pack some little, you know, punches every now and then, but it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Right. There are some little spikes. There are some shocks. Without wanting to give the story away, there are moments where it's, we're living in this sort of like just holding the space, and then all of a sudden, whomp,
Yeah.
and we're hitting something, and that's, there's a good dramatic reason for that. But also, I also wanted to try and portray, and I think I do to a certain extent in the first track, and also I think the track's called Evidence, quite near the end, maybe track 10. Wanted to also give some sense of it's the one where there's a sort of violin ostinato going in there, and the strings are quite prominent in that. I wanted to give some sense also of the lush, verdant quality of the forest that she's in, and that also is an organic world. It's a world devoid of electricity and it is all green trees and rivers, and it's quite desolate and bleak, but it also has a sort of organic beauty as well. So in a couple of tracks, I wanted to minimize anything that was overtly electronic, just so but obviously I couldn't suddenly go into full symphonic realm because it would have sounded weird. It would have been very jarring, but certainly calming down some of the distorted elements and letting us swim within this organic fabric.
And so yeah, you talked about not wanting to do too much with the music and not overdoing it. So what's the secret to building suspense with music, which has been done, Bernard Herrmann and the Hitchcock films, and how do you know what's too much, and when do you know to pull back so you're not overdoing it?
Well, I had a producer who made that very clear, so that was easy. Too much. It's I think you grow with the movie, and you as you're writing, it is a case, especially in a score like this where it's not there is one theme,
right?
So it's not a complex thing where you've got like an animation, for example, where you may have each character's got their own clearly identified thing. I've just been watching the the Indiana Jones films the last few days, just to remind myself how great they are. And it's so clear. Here comes a character. Here's their theme. Here's this. But this is monothematic. There's no doubt about it, and it's a simple theme. And so I guess the idea is that how can you use simplicity to create? I guess the question is how can something that's so in its sort of primary form simplistic, how can that create tension? Right. I think that it is. So a score like this is about textures more so than developing a theme in some kind of Beethoven manner, or like Mahler. It's more how can. There's only so many things you can do with those 5 notes. I turn them upside down a few times, I sustain them, I fragment them, but then I think it is very much about texture and what rubs against it. I just think it was a case of experimentation of how can one, given the fact that this isn't ever, there's no brass section that's going to enter here. It's always, there's a dynamic level that I know I'm not going to go above. So experimenting, how can I find the unease and the tension providing things without going to that big place? I'm not entirely sure I can articulate an answer as to exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think I've just waffled actually for the last 2 minutes. But I definitely know it was a sense of trial and error.
Well,
and also
there has to be. I think there's a human element to it. You have to feel it. So.
And you have to feel it, yeah. You have to, and also you probably have to go too far as well. You have to take it to, there are some cues that if I were to play you earlier versions of it, you'd hear a much a sort of bigger and more oppressive sound, and perhaps in isolation it's right, but I think obviously in the decision in the, well, not to say it's right, but it could work. Just here's this minute of the film, and I've gone for a slightly bigger and further reaching sonic world, but in the context of the whole movie, I'm pretty sure we settled in a place that makes sense. There's a long stretch in the final reel of the movie where she's driving towards her supposed kidnapper, and it's actually I didn't present it as that way on the album. It's a 10-minute cue of she's talking all the way, so its music has to be I can't crushed the dialogue. I've got to be supporting it,
right.
but I've also got to just. But she is driving further and further into this dark forest, and I give some of it on the CD. I guess the way I do it is bringing in these extra layers, so these little pulses, and then another pulse will come in and just create a little counterpoint up against the previous one, then another one, and then that will fade away and something else. So it's just this ever-evolving, shifting thing that I guess, to some people's ears, some people may just say, well, that's a drone, isn't it? That's just a drone.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to say, well, no, actually, it is an evolving landscape, musical landscape, and the evolution of that landscape, albeit subtle, is supposed to correlate with her descent into what's potentially, death for her. So it's trying to do potentially big things, but in a small way.
Right. And well, another thing that I loved about the album is like you do have a lot of long tracks, 4 or 5 minute tracks, which really allow the music to kind of wash over the listener and wash over the audience. And I'm not a fan of a lot of short track albums because they just feel very jumpy and disconnected. So the whole album, the way you presented it in the album, was very good.
Oh well, no, I'm glad to hear you say that. Thank you. And but actually, I think the way I wanted to organise when I was actually writing the cues for the film, it was to keep. I preferred to write longer cues than shorter cues. I mean, there's some places where there's a 5-second sting. There's not much I can do about that. Nor do I represent that in the album because I don't think anyone needs to hear that as a track. But I certainly for me, and as a rule of thumb, I like to take on longer tracks than 3 short cues, just because it gives me a sense that it's easier to find a structure and a place to grow and then subside, and it just feels a little bit more graceful, especially in a score like this. Again, where I say that it is about texture. And it is about letting something wash over you. I mean, I think you have to be in a certain mood to want to listen to scores like this because they are not Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a different sensibility. So it is a sort of late night, couple of glasses of wine, and letting these sound worlds wash over you. And therefore, I think if they're short and abrupt, it's going to piss you off quite soon. So it definitely was a determined. Part of me to make sure that these were as long as they should be, and hopefully not too long, but long enough to feel that there is some kind of structure and familiarity.
Right, and which the whole experience, I enjoyed it so much, and it just it felt your style. It felt, and it just wasn't a cliched, one of those things where I'm like, oh, come on. So I really did enjoy it, and
oh, good.
And so, just to wrap things up, back on our first interview, I asked you if you could score any film ever made with no disrespect to the original composer. You said English Patient. So I just wanted to make sure. I did. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure if that's still your answer. If you'd pick another film.
Wow, I forgot about that. Yeah, the English Patient. Well, I guess again, I would never, it would be so. Arrogant of me to even suggest I could get anywhere near the brilliance of the English Patient, or for perhaps my other suggestion. Just out of it would just be a curiosity.
Right,
obviously, right. The Artist, which I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I actually have not seen it yet, but I do want to.
Oh, right. I really loved it. I mean, I think there's some great films out this year for the whole award season, and I really enjoyed a number of them. But obviously, to in this day and age, to score a silent movie is a rarity. And I think I don't know much about the guy, Ludovic Bors.
Ludovic Bors, yeah. The score is really good, yeah.
It's a great score, and and also the guy's got nowhere to hide. I mean, it's him. He is the sound of that movie,
right.
and I thought it was splendid. Really fun, proper orchestration. Great music. And like I say, I don't know what I would. I'd just be curious, even to say that maybe one day when I have a break, I'll put the film up and just try and write the first cue and see what I come up with. But only out of a sort of academic interest that here's a silent movie and,
right.
and the notion of so maybe. But I mean that The English Patient still holds a very fond place in my heart, and the score I still think is immense, and probably yet another reason why I shouldn't ever even think about touching it.
I just think it's a very interesting question for composers.
It's a very interesting question. I must research what some of your other interviewees have answered in that respect.
And nobody has. I keep every time I tell people this, no one has repeated an answer, which is great too, because everyone's like, oh, I'd love to try this, I'd love to do that, and
Right. Well, it is, because you do feel like you're treading on sort of sacred ground. That having gone through the process of writing a score, you do know that the pain and anguish involved, and I imagine everyone would. I'd be interested to know how many people have given you an answer where they thought, my God, well, the reason I want to do this is because that composer screwed it up so much. But I imagine it more often than not, it's someone who's, the answers tend to be people who liked the original so much. And
right.
Just out of curiosity, wondered what they do, rather than saying, "God, I'll fix the mess that they did the first time around."
Yeah, no, that's not the point of the question.
No. But I don't know. I guess I wonder with a world a film world which is dominated with sequels and remakes. I wonder if we will ever see the idea of old movies from 30, 40 years ago being rescored with different sensibilities. I mean, it would be an interesting. I guess just give 60 years ago, who was using? Well, I don't know the exact dates of film music history, but at some point, electronica played no part in films. It'd be interesting to look back at a film. Well, I say interesting, and I'm sure many people would say this is absolutely sacrilegious, but it would be interesting to see how a film that had a symphonic score would work with a slightly different guise. So it's not necessarily electronic, maybe it's vocal, or maybe it's ethnic, but just given that there are more options available to us today,
yeah, definitely. And
it's almost like what would J.S. Parks say if he knew that there was a synthesizer? A lot of people speculate he probably would have loved it and he would have messed around with it, and I don't know. I think we often sort of shoot down the advancements in technology and music and say that they're somehow impoverished and not as good as the sort of classical way. But I think more interestingly it would be, let's embrace everything we've got. I think that's one of the joys of film music, that someone who comes from a pop background, someone who comes from a classical background, an ethnic music background, sound design, they're all thrown into a pot and great things can come of it. So it does strike me that experimentation, albeit just on a whim, I wonder how this would work.
Right, yeah.
It might show some interesting results, or not. Maybe it will prove that things are just fine as they are.
Well, I was watching an interview with Martin Scorsese, and he was talking about Hugo and how he was working with 3D, and he was like, he was sitting next to James Cameron, so I felt like it was almost like a puppet master with strings talking about 3D. But he's like, he says, imagine Citizen Kane in 3D, and he's saying, I'm not saying do it, but just imagine it. So it was just
right. Yeah, often just the thought of these things, just the conceptual idea is it can throw your brain into all sorts of funny places, and hopefully sort of creative and not stifled by tradition as well.
Right. Well, that's all I have for you now, David. Thank you so much.
Great.
It was a pleasure again.
Absolutely, as always. Thank you very much.
And
I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Oh, very soon.
I don't know what. I guess our next thing would have to be meeting being in the same room. We've now got from email to telephone, so
we're
that'll be the next logical step.
All right, I'll look forward to it. Good luck with Gone, and it's opening. What is it? Not this weekend. Next weekend, right?
Next weekend, yeah, 24th.
24th. Okay. Well, thank you so much, David, and
not at all. Pleasure.
Have a great day.
Thank you, and you. Take care.
Bye.